correspondent, Israeli Special Ops veteran Aaron Cohen, and former Deputy National Security Advisor KT McFarland. KT, you and I both worked for President Trump. We have watched him deliberate and make hard decisions, you especially in the national security capacity. I want to know from you, how do you think he's consuming information right now? And do you ultimately think he decides to strike Fordo? He said today maybe that won't be necessary.
You know, you and I have been there with him. I've been in the Situation Room with him when he was facing similar kinds of things, where he was trying to decide, should he attack the Syrian airfields that were being used for chemical weapons attacks against his people? President Trump is really good at this. He's thoughtful. He goes around the room. He asks, his Secretary of State, Defense, Intelligence, community, what's the situation? What are our vulnerabilities? What are our strengths? What are our weaknesses? What could go wrong? What could go right? And then he probably comes up with a couple of options of his own. He's very thoughtful about it. He takes all the information in, and then he makes a decision. He doesn't delegate the decision. He owns the decision. He makes a decision. And then once he makes a decision, he lets it be carried out. He lets the military do it. The thing that sort of trigger, I know, with President Trump is when he says, we'll see, or let's see what happens. That means he's not ready to make a decision. The events have not played themselves out yet, and that's why I think he's given himself 2 weeks to decide. What's Israel going to do in 2 weeks? How much more are they going to degrade the capabilities? What's going on with the Ayatollah? Is he going to go to negotiate? Is he not going to go to negotiate? What's going on in the inner circle? Is a regime change possible? All those things are still to be played out.
Yeah, he deliberates, then he acts. It's why Soleimani's no longer on the face of the earth. It's why al-Baghdadi's no longer on the face of the earth. You know, Aaron, as you've been with Israeli special forces, and to that point about KT and President Trump being very deliberative and strategic in the things he does, I want to pull up this headline from the Times of Israel: how an Israeli-American deception campaign lulled Iran into a false sense of security. Israeli officials says Trump's warnings to Netanyahu not to attack, as well as stories of Israeli officials flying to the U.S. and Prime Minister taking a short vacation, were all there to fool the regime. I put this up because this president, and it sounds like Netanyahu, they play some four-dimensional chess. So do you believe, Aaron, that there's some strategy going on to what we're hearing from Netanyahu and from Trump publicly?
Well, it's good to see you, Kaylee. I do believe that there is strategy going on here. This is a very serious business. There was a ton of deception that's been happening over the last several months. We saw how Israel's intelligence agency, Mossad, was able to infiltrate Iran months in advance and set up drone bases, missile trucks, and who knows what other asymmetrical intelligence operations they're conducting right now. But where I'm at with all of this, Kaylee, is that we need to understand that it's not military strikes alone that are going to stop this threat. It will buy time. But really what has to happen is complete decapitation of that nuclear program. But there's multiple pieces that need to be layered. So hitting the program and the people running it, Kaylee. Then we need to think about in Israel disrupting the Quds Force command and control, which is how we got 30 generals into one room, tricked them, and hit them with a missile, and it was lights out. Crippling the IRGC cyber warfare and regional influence as well. Disorienting the leadership long enough for the Iranian people to start to move here. Is there a potential shift of power? Going after the nukes are great, and striking Iran is great. But at the end of the day, that poison ideology, which is past 60% in that bunker, is really what the threat is. And so I don't really think that the strikes are enough. We need to be looking at the macro picture here, which is Pahlavi enough to be put into power? Can we get dissent from generals and police chiefs under Pahlavi? And will the Iranian people be able to get enough confidence in Israel and America's operation here to say the IRGC is weak, we have nothing to be scared of? Yep. Let's take back our country. So that's where I'm at with that.
KT, I want to play a quick soundbite for you. This is Rahm Emanuel. He brought this up last night. Really interesting comparison. 1994, Bill Clinton in the Situation Room.
Now, I'm haunted by two things. Not haunted, but I have a flashing yellow light. In 1994, same room, Situation Room, Bill Clinton was getting basically his security team bombed North Korea. President Carter having gone there, messed it up and messed up that opportunity. And now you have a nuclear North Korea.
KT, is this a 1994 moment?
You know, you don't know. The question is which moment is it? Is it going to be like Libya, where topple the dictator and then something even worse happens? Or is it going to be like the fall of the Soviet Union, where topple the dictator and democracy happens? One of the things that President Trump has said time and again, no boots on the ground, regime change. I mean, how many times has he made the speech where he said to everyone in the world, you choose your own governments, you choose your own leaders, you choose how you want to, you know, run your affairs. So I think I would really take issue. I don't think President Trump is actively looking for regime change. If the Iranian people want to do it, that's one thing. But to push it on them, then we own it. Then what happens the day after? We do not want to get dragged into another forever war. And unless the Iranian people themselves have a plan, I really hesitate to think what would happen if we start taking out everybody ourselves.
Aaron Cohen, KT McFarland, thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.